Finally, we're showing you how to build the side pieces. We showed you that we did experiment with different colors and editing until we were happy with the color situation. Now we're going to build the last long side so you'll be able to see the whole process. So this inside line is the finished edge of the quilt. The extra 1/2 inch we added so that after we machine quilt it, we can square it up. But that inside line is a very important line. That is our finished edge of the quilt. And you can see it was added to all the perimeter pieces, that extra 1/2 inch. So the inside line is the finished edge of the quilt. And so by very carefully eyeballing this up in the borders, you can start sealing this down. You just position it on top of the design with the freezer paper on top. And now we're just going to let the heat of the iron, you can always test. Don't test your iron by touching the iron. You can feel the heat by putting your finger on the paper. So there are many ways you can start building this. A lot of times we do start from an edge and go work that way. But you can study your design and see that there's some choppy ends here. There are a lot of small edges right there. And so I like to smooth those out by putting a long piece on top. We started this by placing some of our pattern pieces close to where they're going to be placed. But again, I'm just going to sight this along those lines and down the side here and seal that down. So I'm going to build from this corner out. So the next piece is number A2. So the only edge we have to turn here is right here where those two pieces are going to come together. So I'm going to use my glue stick and a small cutting mat as my gluing board. It's a long piece, so I'm kind of turning it to the diagonal. You do the outside, or the first gluing is in an outward motion. That makes the seam allowance tacky so that you can turn it back. And I usually start turning these somewhere in the middle and just fold it along the edge. Try to get it right on that paper edge. So that is the first gluing. You finger press. That's the only pressing in this entire quilt top. Then you turn it over, and this turn back edge now, there's no French fuse there, so we have to join the seam allowances with the second gluing of the turn back seam allowances. And because this has been stabilized by turning the first turn, now that it's reinforced, you can glide the glue along the seam allowance without stretching it. So now this is where all those registration marks come in handy. You line that up just like that, and then you seal it down with the sealing iron. All right, now we're ready for the next piece here, and that's going to go right there. So all we have to do is turn that edge right there. You notice these edges that are sealed down, you don't do anything with those. You leave those just like they are, and then you turn the ones that are on top. It makes everything interlocked. It's very strong, and the seams are very flat. And the only pressing we had to do was this finger pressing and then seal it down. So we don't have to open any seam allowances and decide which way we want to press them So you just finger press it with your hands. Do the second gluing. Now that it's reinforced with the first gluing, we just can glide that along the edge, line up the registration marks, and seal it down. You can see these big pieces go down very, very quickly. I use the point of the sealing iron on the seam allowance because I want those to be pressed down. All right, and now I could decide to do number 10 or go to number 5. I came up with, I like to place these things kind of in the order I want to use them. It makes it go a little faster. So we just have to turn that one edge. And where else is it touching? It's going to touch right there. So I'm going to do that small area first. Anywhere it's going to touch another pattern, that's the only place you have to turn. I'm going to make a little clip here in the seam allowance. So I only have to turn from that clip to that edge. And then, so I can turn that. Let me make sure that's going to look good. Okay, and then I'm going to turn this edge before I do the second gluing. If you do all the first gluing before you do the second gluing on any piece that has more than one edge to turn, because then you keep your fingers clean. You don't have to get so sticky. So in an outward motion for the first gluing. Finger press. And now I'm just going to put the glue on these two edges, just a little bit right there, and then here, glue it. And you're generous with the glue because that's what's holding all of the seam allowances together. And then you can decide where you want to go next. You want to go there, but I'm going to do, actually I'm going to wait because I'm going to do the dove. Well, no, I'm going to put the background piece here. That's A17 here. So all I have to do is turn that one edge. If you kind of organize this and put your pattern pieces close to where you're going to be using them, that saves a lot of time. You don't want to have to keep searching for the right piece. Let me straighten that one out a little bit. I can just pull it up, and I'm going to just straighten it up a little bit. Sometimes you slightly overlap your pattern pieces. I want to get that nice and straight, so there's a nice straight edge here for the wing of our dove. And then seal it down. Now I want to find my sewer stiletto, because when I moved that, I was gluing slightly on top of this paper. I guess I can pick it up with my finger, but just by lifting that, usually the sewer stiletto, I want to leave that there, but I didn't want to have to pick out paper later on. So now you can decide. What I want to do is I can show you, we could go back here and keep going it, but I wanted to show you this, why we put this long one down here, because that gives us a nice smooth edge when we have that all turned back. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that edge now. I'm going to team tag this with Rachel. She will do this next little part here. This, we changed our pattern. We added the doves to the corners. The original design had a more like just triangles, and we decided we didn't like that. We wanted to repeat the, it's an old drunkard's path pattern that you turned into a dove by adding beaks. We thought that would make a more interesting corners for the quilt. So just glide that there. So you only turn the edge that you're going to, that's touching. You see, this is the long edge that's going to kind of cover that. And now we don't want any little raw edges sticking out, so this is when I sometimes clip that off because I don't want any raw edges showing. Okay, Rachel and I are going to team tag this. I'm going to turn this over and she can show you building the dove area.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm Anne's assistant. I'm going to be demonstrating building the kind of dove section of the corner of one of our long sides. So just as Anne was showing you earlier, because we have these long pieces that run alongside a couple of smaller pieces, they're really great for kind of sealing down all of the small pieces. Otherwise, you'd have to turn each individual one rather than just turning one piece at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and put down this A10, the other purple background piece, and then we'll start building the dove. So line it up, see where it's touching a piece that's already down. It's only along this side, so that's the only side that I need to turn. I'm going to glue in an outward motion so as to not stretch the fabric. Flip it over and finger press. Do a second gluing. Line up registration marks. Then I have these little dog ears on either end from the angle that they're at. I'm just going to clip those off. And use your sealing iron. So we have a couple small pieces in here by the leaf and the berry. So we've got the beak of our dove. We also have a small kind of additional piece that we've got a small little background piece. So let's do that one first. So lining it up where it goes, the only place that it's touching a piece that's already down is right along here, right along this edge. So I only need to turn that side. Even when you have tiny pieces, you just proceed in the same way that you would a long straight edge. You line it up, match where another piece is already down, turn back where they're touching. Clip my dog ear. So I'm just going to line it up because this is kind of on a curve. I'm going to line it up and make sure that I don't need to turn anything out. So it's not really that I need to turn anything because everything's going to get sealed down. I am going to clip some of these edges so that they're not sticking past the freezer paper that's already there. So I'm just going to clip this corner. Just kind of trimming it. So check it again. And then I'll do my second gluing. Okay, so for our little beak here, I'm going to line it up and see where it's touching pieces that are already down. So along this side and this side, so that's what we'll turn. I'm going to do one side at a time to try and help keep my fingers from getting sticky. So glue in an outward motion, and then finger press to your freezer paper pattern piece edge. In an outward motion, finger press again. So with points, with no sewing until you quilt it, you're going to end up with these kind of little dog ears. So what you want to do, anything past the freezer paper pattern, once you've already turned it, will be seen on your quilt top. So we don't want that little dog ear to be seen. So I'm going to just flip this over, use my little pair of embroidery scissors, and just clip it to make a nice point. I'll go back, check and make sure. I'm also going to clip off these little dog ears down here. And then we'll do our second gluing. So again, you're going to glue on the seam allowances that you've just created. Line up my registration marks. And seal it down. So generally we build from the background to the foreground, which is exactly what we're going to do now. So we're going to speed this up so you can see it go quickly. Almost all of these are straight lines or curves that you've seen us demonstrate before in other videos. So we're going to build the background of this dove and then the foreground of the dove, and we'll speed it up for you. finish building the dove in the corner of the long piece, or the long side, we're going to use this piece A20 and seal, turn both sides so that it creates a finished edge. So rather than turning each individual one of these 4 pieces, all we have to do is turn one side of A20. We will end up turning both, but this one side of A20 seals down all of these. So you can just be methodical as you move through placing down your pieces as to what makes the most sense. Because the freezer paper acts as our stabilizer for our fabric, with these long pieces, sometimes the freezer paper starts to come off. So because I was just manipulating it to be able to turn one side, I'm just going to use my sealing iron and press it down again, just to give it a little bit of extra stability before I try and turn another long side. So I'm lining it up, matching my registration marks. I just want to point out we didn't turn either of the short sides of this long piece A20 because those pieces aren't down. The one up here is the edge of the fabric, so this is where we'll join it to another unit, or actually this will be the final edge of the quilt. It'll join on this side. But this end is going to be sealed down by piece A18. So I don't want to turn that edge, I leave it raw. Then just like with A20, A18 is going to seal down each of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate pieces. So rather than turning 5 separate pieces, we're just going to turn this one side of A18. We'll turn it here where it's touching. We'll leave this side still raw because the next piece will seal on top of it. And again, because this is a long piece, I'm just going to make sure it's really anchored, the freezer paper pattern is really anchored to our fabric.